Alright, so let's take this extruder off. So first off, you need to take that bolt off, that bolt off, and then there's 3 back here. 1, 2, and 3, if you can see that, I hope. Okay, so once you've established that, now you're going to be probably taking this apart to do maintenance on it. I would take a glue gun and glue the outside of these wire clips. That way, you know, you're not going to mess them up because you're going to be taking it apart. I would disconnect a few wires. Some of them are pretty difficult. I will say that. Alright, so to get to the bearings, you want to take the screw off. There we go. Jeez, oh Pete. Alright, so once all that's disconnected, it shouldn't be hard to know where all these go. I mean, alright, then we could take off the hot end. And you have a screw back here too. I forget about that sometimes. Now this should pop right out. There we go. So now to get to these bearings, you don't have to take this completely apart unless you want to, but take this one out. That one. The point of this is to have less tension on your extruder so it can actually do its job. Everything should work great. Alrighty, then this comes off the motor, and I would make sure that this is all the way loose so there's no tension on the spring whatsoever at all. Right here is where the bearings are. 1 and 2. Okay, so now that you got everything taken apart, just take Allen wrench, pry on the bearings, a little here, a little there. And they should pop right out. Almost. Come on, baby. There we go. There's one. So these are the new bearings, but I'm just going to show you guys in detail of how to do this. Take this apart. This just pops out. There we go. There's your gears. There's little bearings in there too. I noticed mine were not moving that well, and I put a little bit of grease in them. Now they're moving pretty freely. And take this off. And it does help if you hear a little bit of clicking. Your extruder making noise every now and then. It just makes a little bitty noise every time it retracts. It's because of the spring. You know, it gets kind of wore out after a while. So if you stretch it out a little bit and put it back in there, that's what fixes that little clicking noise. Alright, so this is kind of dirty. And here's the other bearing. You don't want to pry it all up at one time on one side because you may bend the bearing. So there we go, there's the other bearing. Now I'm going to take these parts, I'm going to clean them up real good. And I will be back. Alright, so now that you got all your parts nice and clean, there's one thing that you want to do, and I know you've been told, make sure you watch the video all the way through because there's some vital parts that can save you a lot of time. This is one of those. So this, for instance, see how there's an offset? You may not be able to get that right. So I always take my Bowden tube and try to put it in there. Now you can see the gap. So there you go. And that's pretty much how I like to do my Bowden tube. And then I would put my hot end on, or my heat brake on. And if I was doing, you know, not a all metal hot end, and I had the heat brake where the Bowden tube touched the nozzle, I would go ahead and put it on right now and then snip it. That's the best way, because you want your Bowden tube to be perfect. That will determine everything. That'll determine if you're gonna have heat creep or under extrusion, whatever. So now that we got that situated, we know that it goes there. Take your little brush, put your little dab of grease, brush your bearing, just push it down with your fingers. Perfect. I always take a little bit extra. There we go. Take this bearing, do the same. Push down with your digits. There we go. Slap a little extra grease. And once you got that done, take your brush with a little bit of lube. Do the edge right here a tad bit. Then do the top. That's so you don't get any noise. You'll hear a bunch of rattling. There you go. I guess. No, like that. There we go. This This is kind of a pain. And stretch your spring out. I already stretched this out a tad bit, so. There we go. Nobody said this is a walk in the park. There we go. All right. Slap a little more. Like so. There we go. Should be all set. Make sure that's right. Nope. Oh, you can get it in there, but that'll bind. And you don't want that to bind, because then that slows your filament down. It'll make you have under extrusion. You don't want to do that. Oops, wrong one. The round-headed one goes up on top on the left-hand corner. Then your motor wire goes on the left-hand side, like so. And I always make sure they're all snug before I actually tighten them down. And this thing should run like a champ. Yep, sounds good. And I always take a little bit of grease. You have bearings on the front and the back side of this this little motor, the stepper motor. So I always just put a little bit of grease there, which I did. So that should suffice. Sounds nice and smooth. As smooth as it's going to get. And I have already cut my Capricorn Bowden tube, whatever you want to call it. These little cutters, you get like 8 of them on Amazon. They work pretty good. So it's a nice level cut. And alright. Make sure your wires are oriented properly. These screws. And then once I get this on, I always like to run a little bit of grease on your filament. And just to like break in the new Capricorn tube. I didn't do it once before, and it just, I don't know, for some reason, like there's a little break-in period or something. But it may start under extruding and getting stuck, or it's just weird. So I ran a little bit of grease on it, and that cleared it up, and it's never done that again on the Plus. This is the extruder for the Max. All right. So now on this, the old hot end, I want to take the MX6, put on your threads here. This will keep it nice and cool. That's the whole point in doing this. You don't want it to get hot. And the reason how you know this is the right side up is because there's no grooves for the screws. And I always just take mine and get it to pretty close to level. Take my CHT nozzle. Tighten her up. And then always make sure, once you heat this up, you tighten that again. Here's my Bowden tube, and I always like to oil this up a tad, a little bit. Okay, there we go. And let's take our MX6, put it on here, be generous. This is a new brush, by the way. And I would try to make sure you get this covered really well, because this needs to stay nice and cool. If that gets on your filament, this stuff, man, you have to take everything off, and it's just a pain. And it does not come off unless you actually take it off and clean it. So if you ever see this stuff on your filament, be prepared to take it apart, because it won't go away. All we'll do is slow everything down and cause problems. Okay. Now, all right, now you'll have to get you some new screws from Amazon. I have them all mixed up, so I can't tell you which ones. I would say they're probably M28s, But if you just get this whole thing, you'll be able to figure it out. Yeah, I didn't mean to have them mixed up, but hey, things happen. Alright, so let's see if it works. Yep, that's long enough. I could measure them with my calipers, but I'm pretty sure those are the M28s. Put some more, or boredom paste on this one. You want to make sure this is level on the other side. There we go. Alright. Make sure you tighten up this screw. Alright, so then grab your cover. Get this baby on. Part way. Get your screw in there. That goes there. Your thermistor goes in here. This one goes here like so. All right. Jeez, Pete. Make sure all your wires are tucked in there. Nice and neat. I have to tighten this up. The heat tight. That's cleaned off good. So I'm gonna go ahead and hook it up. So the first thing you want to do, obviously, is 5. Set your temperature for your hot end. All right, once you got it heated, I always take some needle nose, tighten her up pretty snug. There we go. I want to get my bed going because we are going to do a print. And we can put on the boot. And I'm going to heat this up because we got to re-level the bed. I level my bed by using 2 pieces of paper. And if you check it with your calipers, 0.2 millimeters. I haven't ran into any issues. It makes it easier for me to set the printer. And that's how I've always, well, I didn't always do it that way. I started out doing it with 1 piece of paper and had issues. I go around 2-3 times, whatever it takes. It takes a little time. I mean, you gotta have some patience. But anyway, so while we're sitting here waiting, so you have some screws right here in the front corner. On the back corner, both sides. You need to loosen your gantry. This is your gantry or your Z axis. Under here, loosen those, loosen all of them, and use a square. And it's very easy. You just make sure your gantry is straight up and down. You gotta take the stabilizers, the bars off. Or not off, just take off from the top. And same thing on this side. Take it off from the top. Once you have all your bolts loosened, line up the gantry with your square or your Z-axis where it's straight up and down. Tighten up all your bolts to your gantry, to your frame. Keep checking it until you get everything tight. And once you got your gantry or your Z-axis all tight and it's straight up and down, then move on to your X-axis. And you want to make sure that the top is parallel with the bottom. On the Neptune, there's these little white lines, which are awesome. I love them. If you can make your own, just make sure you get a tape measure and bring it down from the top all the way. Just make your own lines. Make sure that they're right, and go off that line. Check your X-axis. Make sure that both top and bottom are lined up parallel. You may have to go in the back here and loosen up some screws, and it's not that difficult. That's the gist of it. That's basically the fast version. Mine's lined up, and it takes a little while. So just like leveling the bed, in order to have things perfect, it takes some finesse. So loosen the bolts, use your square, tighten your stabilizer bars once you get the gantry tight, and then tighten up all your bolts. And tighten them in a sequence. Don't tighten them all up at one time. Go around the machine and tighten them so that way it's all tight. And you want to make sure that this is sitting on a flat surface when you do that. I have a glass table. This isn't a glass table, but I have a glass table or granite. I use the glass table that I have behind me for one machine, and then I use the granite in the kitchen on another, and they're both fine. They're perfectly lined. Once you do your manual leveling, you always have to do the automatic leveling. Always. Because that's what calibrates the bed. I've seen some people just manually level it and then print. You can't do that. So we're about ready to see if this is going to print properly. Alright, let's see if she prints. Put a little bit of oil on the filament. See how that first layer is. That's never failed me with 2 pieces of paper. Perfect first layers all the time. Sometimes it gives you a little trouble, but once it gets going and it's broken in, it works awesome. It takes a minute to get broken in though. I'd say probably a good hour or 2 of it printing. Well, she's a printing. I also did a new heater block, which was, I think it's bimetal, copper and titanium. It was the more expensive one at Amazon. I'll put that in the description. Plus I did the heat brake, that is bimetal for sure. That was the more expensive one also. This one is really touchy. If your retraction isn't dead set on this, you can have issues. And so with the normal hot end on this, I had 2.4. With the all metal hot end, I did 1.8. It seems to be working pretty good. I just guesstimated pretty much. And as you can see, the paper trick, using 2 pieces of paper, that's like perfect first layer. So, but it's, yeah, so it seems to be printing fine. So I did the plus, and I figured I might as well go ahead and do the max also, and I'll save that for a video, which is this one. So any questions, I mean, hit me up in the comments. I'm pretty detailed on this. I'll leave everything in the description that I use. The heat block, the thermistors, which you never used to be able to get those like 4 months ago for this machine. Now you can get them. The paste. I do have Y-axis rails on this. I mean, I'll put those in the description too. They work awesome. There's no play whatsoever at all. I love them. I would have never have changed them, but I had to, because the original roller wheels, they didn't wear out, but there was play in my bed. So with the play in the bed, I went ahead and bought new wheels, and it tightened up just a tad bit where there was no play. But after like a month of using it, there was play again. So I was pretty much forced to get the Y-axis rails. But that's it for this video. Thanks, you guys.